Hello, and welcome to the HPTVPodcast, where the other host cannot hear the intro, so it's kind of weird when it stops playing and I have to introduce the podcast, which happens to be about the Harry Potter TV show coming to HBO, hopefully in 2026. I've been hearing some 2027 chatter. They're going to film this summer. Don't make me wait. Don't make me wait.
That makes me don't do that.
Yeah. I'm Mitchell. I'm here along with my co-hosts and siblings, Jamie and Steven, and we just want to talk about everything. We feel like it's not too soon as everything starts going on. We can over-examine, we can do every single thing. I'm ready to do a 2-hour podcast on a 10-second teaser of Hogwarts, you know? But that's the thing. When things come out, do you guys want to try and not spoil ourselves? Do we want to try and, I mean, we can't spoil the plot, right? But maybe some new exciting things, like, is that something we want to discuss openly, or we want to, like, pretend we're not seeing or try not to see?
I think we just go for everything. I mean, at this point, like, I think they're gonna, it's 2025, man. They gotta set the bar high. They're gonna have to let some stuff out to keep people interested. I think it's worth talking about all of it. I do think it's worth calling out that we are gonna spoil everything from books and movies. If you haven't read the books or seen the original, like, movie series, then maybe do that before you watch this podcast if you don't want us to ruin it for you.
And I will ruin Cursed Child for you as well. I'm the only one who's seen it. I think you guys have read the script, but I will rant on it at some point. So
me too. I mean, I haven't seen it, but I read the script. Not canon.
I'll also ask, though, what rock you have been living under if you haven't seen the Harry Potter movies or read the books up until this point. Like, come on now.
It's really different from Game of Thrones, too. Like, Game of Thrones was big in adult fantasy fiction. Like, Harry Potter's so ubiquitous. And Game of Thrones was so... They could only do, so much because there's such elaborate things. Whereas Harry Potter... And we will talk about this. Like, initially, it really was a children's book series. And so, I don't know. What can we really do to offend the spoileries?
I just think our audience will be what it is. And if you are worried about spoilers, you probably wouldn't be listening to us anyway. But if you haven't read the books or the movies and you're just excited for this anyway, just join on. And you'll probably forget by the time it gets to that part of the show anyway. But yeah, and I feel, too, like on the spoilers, I mean, that's the point of this podcast. We're going to have to, like, spoil things for ourselves and, like, probably get overly excited about everything way out in advance. So
yeah, we'll be able to commiserate with other podcasters who have just covered something that's bad. Well, I don't expect this to be bad, but it's got such a high level of expectation. So the way that we're going to do the podcast is every episode we're generally going to have about 5 big questions, and of course leaves us open to talk about absolutely anything. So we're going to, each 5 sections is going to be represented by something different in Harry Potter that allows us to speak about something. So the first one is going to be The Howler, the famous Molly Weasley special.
So we were going to talk about today what's wrong with the films and why are they remaking them so soon. And it's kind of hard because, like, I'm grateful for the films. We were so excited when we were kids. But the biggest thing I'm seeing, even on Reddit, is, like, we want, like, cohesion. And that's what the films are lacking. And, I mean, just so we set up with, like, and there's going to be some of this in the show, but different directors, different styles, everyone trying to kind of make it their own. I do think we're really fortunate in the fact that the actors stayed put for all 8 movies, which is, like, a huge thing. But to me, the movies do not really go together. They don't connect very well besides the overall arc of everything. So I'm hoping that's what's done better for me. Like, that's probably my biggest thing is even if everything's not, obviously it's not going to be perfectly as I imagined it, but I'm hoping there's a cohesion throughout.
I think it's true. I think it's also, like, just the little things when we look at, I think Mitchell talked about Hagrid's hut moving and, like, the grounds being different and just drastic changes in, like, style. Like, I'm hoping we can have a little more cohesion there and, a set showrunner who will help keep it consistent for us.
No Dumbledore yelling at Harry.
I know. Come on now. Spot on, Mitchell. You're right on.
I think one of the other reasons that they're remaking it now is money. We can't overlook that.
Yes.
And Harry Potter, because of the Fantastic Beasts didn't do well. Cursed Child does well, but it's such a separate thing. There's nothing carrying this forward. I guess Hogwarts Legacy was fairly well received, but there's nothing else that's getting the non-core millennial audience engaged, I think. And we're going to harp on this a lot, is that, like, they're going to have to get kind of younger people to like it, and the general audiences who might have any curiosity, because it's going to be expensive. And, like, we are the type to notice the production costs. Like, I know they're going to use volume on this, and I'm already freaking out at like the volume. If you don't know, and we don't want to say anything to patronize anyone, we're not experts in the industry or anything, but we do want to talk in detail. The volume is what they started using with Mandalorian, and now they've kind of abused in some other, mostly Disney, but other people are using it. And essentially like a more realistic LED screen that replaces the green screen. And it looks amazing sometimes, but when they overuse it, it starts to really show the lack of depth, and the it just doesn't quite look right. And so I don't mind that they're using it, but like that's the kind of thing where we have to be like, where are they going to cut corners? And yeah, I just want to make sure I talk about the casting real quick, that I am really worried someone's going to leave. Can you sign someone to it's going to be 10 years to film this, at least. Like, they're going to have to take 18 months between these seasons. I know there's been talk of filming something back to back, but that's really hard for this size of story other than books 1 and 2. And I know they want to keep the kids the right age. They've said they're going to cast more age appropriately to kind of like differentiate from the films. But like, if Dumbledore had to change, but man, if we have to change someone else in the middle, one of the core trio, which we almost did, that it rarely goes well.
Yeah, I think that's going to be tough. And the other things you just can't control, like, I know that was original idea for the films, was changing out the kids as they grew up, and then they decided not to do that. But like, if someone decides they want their career to go in a different direction, or they don't like the spotlight of it, or, you know, I'm sure we'll talk about this at some point, but the fans, you know, you look at like Star Wars fans attacking actors and stuff over them not being ideally what they want. I think Harry Potter will be a little bit different than that. It's childhoods, but I don't know, it's gonna be hard if like people are jumping in and out and changing actors a lot.
And yeah, casting's never going to be perfect, but it is someone leaving in the middle and kind of like, and someone having a different tone, like Michael Gambon, like, who I don't hate. It's like, I think we've said a lot of negative things about the film, but hopefully people realize also like, we really enjoy them, but he has a couple of key moments that really are like, but the director is part of that too. And that's the other thing is, will the creative voices remain the same behind the scenes? Because we saw Christopher Columbus hail the first two, and yeah, those were my first adaptions other than Fellowship of the Ring. That's when I realized the true issues of adaptions. It made sense to keep changing the style, and we got some really cool things out of that change, but then you had one director take 5 through 8, and then also did the Fantastic Beasts films. Like, we need some consistency, but I'd rather have it changed behind the scenes than in front of the camera, I guess.
I think the only pass I'll give them on casting is if someone dies. That's acceptable, I suppose, that they can replace them. But otherwise, I think it's hard, though. I mean, some of it is finding, you know, people who are more or less no-name actors, right? Because this is the thing that makes their career. It's a little easier to keep them around for a while. You've got some of those, you know, if you bring another Alan Rickman in, it's going to be really hard to, you know, monopolize the schedule and that kind of stuff, right, when they're so big. So it'll be interesting how they handle the casting piece there, how many nobodies we get and how many, you know, legacy actors we see.
It's going to be a long shooting schedule as well, much longer. It's going to take much more. And it is like Game of Thrones. You saw, like, yeah, the creators wanted to end it, but also some of those actors were like, I got to do something else with my life, because a movie is like, you know, a 3 to 6 month shoot, obviously, if it's a huge film, but this is going to be 6 to 10 months, 11 months easily, which means it is the vast majority of your life. And I don't know how much you can lock someone in, or you want someone there who's miserable. And Alan Rickman, of course, died really young, but for like Dumbledore, the guys like they're looking at, like, we'll talk about casting in the next section, but they're not that old, and maybe that is quite intentional.
Probably why. And the fact that, you know, eventually Dumbledore, you know, we have to see him younger, and then, you know, like, just cutting his hair short.
Jude Law back. Jude Law just
I'm all for Jude Law just coming back.
I was gonna say, let's go to the next section and talk about casting and shooting and everything. So that's the pensive, looking at reiterating some of the things, the information that's out there that we have, right? So we know about casting so far.
Don't know anything for sure, but Jamie, go over the ones that have been, there's some that have been heavily, like, legitimately rumored.
So there was an article in Variety where it was mentioned, I don't know, this could have been a rumor they heard or whatnot, that their goal was to have a short list by January, this January. So maybe they're getting down. I know they've auditioned like 30,000 kids looking for the trio, which is pretty crazy. But there have been a lot of rumors around Dumbledore, Mark Rylance.
Yep.
And then there's been rumors about, do you know how to say his name?
I don't. Yeah, we should say the guy rumored for Snape. It is really tough to pronounce. So Mark Rylance and yeah, they've kind of said they want to differentiate from Alan Rickman, and that's why the actor for Snape that we've heard so far is black, which, like, we're three white people not equipped to discuss whether that is like. Well, I think we're just happy for him to be a really good character. I think Jamie, I'm gonna steal your idea. Like he's too hot. He's too good looking.
When I saw that man, I think Papa Asidu. I know that's really
That
wrong,
actually
I'm
sounds like
butchering
what I've kind of heard a little bit, but
it. But the first image I said that is an attractive man, and that is not at all how Snape is described, nor how I imagined him. But he is a good actor, and I do think that's probably where it's gonna fall. Like good actors who have been in things and done well, but they aren't, they aren't like household names, because I think people they're going to try to cast are people probably trying to either make a bigger name for themselves, or people kind of rounding out their careers maybe who kind of want something just consistent and, something that like is almost a 9 to 5 to them in a way, but who are ready not to be jumping from film to this to that. So, but it's going to be really hard going against the cast that they had in the movies. But again, how Mitchell mentioned, from what's been rumored, they are going to try to actually follow more of the ages in the book, which I will really appreciate, because if you haven't read the books, a lot of those adult characters, especially like Sirius, Lupin, they're much younger than the people who played them in the movies. Snape.
we love Gary Oldman, but yeah, he's
Yes.
it doesn't actually make sense. I mean, it makes sense for him to have a child Harry's age, which kind of lines up, but people got to remember that Lily and James had Harry really young. So it'll be interesting to see where they take it. And there have been other names floated, but yeah, a lot of the fan casting rumors are great, but it's like, one, they've said they're going to stay British, and two, people want really hot people. I'm like, is that actually the best? Or maybe we should get a character actor who needs the money. But it is interesting. I will say, like, there are so many people who have great careers, and no one from America would ever recognize them. Like, they're in hit after hit after hit over here, and on the BBC and ITV and Channel 4, and they never cross the pond in something bigger. Or they might have, like, Call the Midwife. Like, people in America have seen that, but here it's still a staple. It still gets huge ratings. Monoculture is still much bigger in the UK when it comes to these TV shows. And so there are some really great actors. Obviously, British people already, they very much per capita, they overperform in acting. So it'll be interesting to see where they get big name stars, which they've said they want a big name for Dumbledore, and then where they decide to get. And Snape is so big, they have to try. But like, I've already heard like a character actor name for Molly Weasley and stuff. But the famous British people were all in the first one. That's what Martin Freeman once said. He was like, they used them all. I think he was on Jimmy Kimmel or something, and he said that. So
Well, it's going to be interesting if they reuse some of those people who might have been younger, like people who could play maybe older characters now or something. But Mitchell, have you mentioned Mitchell lives in the UK? So if that's confusing to anyone, did we mention that?
I briefly mentioned that, but let's
Okay, good.
let's say it adds
Sure,
to
we're like, over
my
here.
it adds to my credibility.
With your American accent. Yeah. But I think the thing too about, how you quickly mentioned, like, a lot of UK actors are trained theatrically. And that was also a thing that was really jarring for me when I first saw the movies, was like kind of like a grandiose manner of saying certain things. And I think that definitely toned down throughout the films. I think that also depends on the director who's directing at the time. But that's going to be interesting too if they play with that a little bit more, of like being maybe a little more subtle sometimes. And I also don't blame them for that, because everything feels so rushed in the films. And again, that's what we're excited for, is like being able to have more characters have character arcs than could in the films, where it was mainly just Harry and then a little bit the other two.
Oh, sorry. We do have a lot of British actors that were in the previous Harry Potter films, but I do think there's like a new generation. Like a fair number of them have passed away, and I mean, I know that those were sad moments and everything too, because those again were part of our childhood. But it does open up a lot of space for some really new folks who we haven't seen a lot of yet, especially like you said on this side of the pond.
Yeah, and there's a lot of talk that they're looking at focusing on the adults just a little bit more. So maybe we're going to get some hopefully light, not intrusive on the books, but teacher storylines of sorts, because they want to have some engagement. Because again, the first season should be a little bit of a kid's show, but it's going to need to also grip. Like, it's hard to do a cliffhanger with a story we know. Last thing I'll say on casting is the trio is the key. I want to say, I just finished watching Skeleton Crew, where I really like the children actors. Whereas the last Star Wars show, The Acolyte, I thought the children actors struggled. And so you kind of have to strike gold, and you got to say they had struggles. But the initial trio were not bad and had bright moments, and have had bright moments in their careers since, in very different ways. But kid actors are tricky. But
It's tricky.
We're going to move behind the camera for part 2 of The Pensive. let's talk about what we know behind the scenes, because we have a few concrete things here, because obviously that's got established first. Jamie, I know you and I had a good chat yesterday about this. Why don't you tell us about the showrunner?
So the showrunner, Francesca, there isn't a lot about her. We know she worked on Succession, His Dark Materials, Killing Eve. So obviously those are all good shows, and Succession's a really great show. I think a lot of people are just mentioning Succession, which seems so different than Harry Potter, but she is, and she comes from a writing background. I found a podcast that she was on, and I listened to that. This was before all the Harry Potter stuff, but she sounds like, she grew up in Dorset in England, kind of like away from people. She grew up like exploring and playing outside a lot. And she even mentions in this podcast, which I think was I don't know, maybe at this point she was in talks for Harry Potter, but she talks a lot about identifying with Hermione, which I think is cool. So she's obviously a fan of the books, which I am happy to hear. And I think out of the trio, you want a Hermione maybe running the show. So I do have hope when it comes to her. And then
we should say on that, His Dark Materials, that show everyone said was really accurate. There are a few things that they complained about, but they're like, because it had been done as a film before, and they remade it not that much, obviously not as mainstream, but they remade it, and people were really happy, especially with the music and production design. The story, because I watched like 4 or 5, and the story just didn't grip me. But it's good to know she's literally done an adaptation that seems to be getting good reviews. And then, season 1 of Killing Eve with great writer, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, a writer of Fleabag, really great writer. But still, just that she was part of that and Succession, which is, maybe considered the best television show of the last 5-10 years, is good. But it takes a lot to then run a successful show. But they auditioned, there were a lot of people in the running. And so you hope she took it away. And then there's a few confirmed writers we'll talk about, and then the Writers Guild of America, or maybe it's an International Writers Guild body, they generally list names associated with the project, and it seems like there's a bunch of other names. So this could be a pretty big writers' room. They could have a group already breaking the second book, but we can definitely talk about who we know for sure. We'll talk about a pick that Jamie and I are torn on a little bit. Well, first,
I did want to mention Mark Milo, who's also English as a director, executive producer as well. So Francesca and he are the ones kind of in charge of casting and stuff right now.
And he worked on Thrones a little bit. He did that movie, The Menu. He worked on Succession. So, I'm not worried about the pedigree. But yeah, Andy Greenwald hosts the Watch podcast. And he was a music critic and then a TV critic. And then he kind of used podcasting to maneuver into a couple writers' rooms. He was in the writers' room for Legion. And I know he was around the writer's room for Mr. Robot. Sam Esmail, who ran Mr. Robot, took him under his wing, got him his own show on USA, which he show ran. And then I know he was in a writer's room for a Star Wars project with Damon Lindelof as well. So but he famously had not read the books until very recently.
And said something to the point of he doesn't think it's very important to stick to the books or read them all, which was mighty frustrating to myself, but I'm hoping there's a balance of that throughout the writers' room.
There needs to be people with outside perspective.
And
for sure,
writers' rooms can be run very differently. Sometimes certain writers only write about certain characters, or this group has this episode, this group, so it might be maybe he's there to make sure there's cohesion, or maybe he's there for overarching things. So who knows? But I did not like that. Not a fan right now.
And he is American, so although Christopher Columbus was American, obviously I get the all-British casting, but if they used a German person, wouldn't bother me if they used, there are obviously, there have been 6 Americans who have done good British accents. John Lithgow, the girl from Bridget Jones, so we'll...
Keep going, I want to hear all 6, because I can't think of that many.
Well, people are pretty torn on who played Tyrion Lannister. He's done a British accent a few times, and he actually does in Game of Thrones. It's not full British; it's kind of more of an indistinct one, but it's definitely there are some, but it would be for very specific key. It doesn't bother me really that he is. But I will go through real quick the other names we've heard from the Writers Guild. I was right; it was the Writers Guild of America. Martha Hillier, who did The Last Kingdom; Ted Cohen, who did Succession, Veep, and Friends; Ripley Parker, who did Everything Now; one of the writers of One Day, which was a big hit this year; and then Sam Holcroft, who was a playwright for the Royal National Theatre, which that would kind of go, we know that there's some theater influence on this as well. So those names don't mean anything to me, but we don't, I'm a pretty big fan, but of TV and film, but I don't even know the name of a television writer until they have quite a resume. So it's good to kind of know some of the, the pedigree and the different names that are floating around out there.
I think Laura Neal was mentioned at some point too, and she wrote on Killing Eve, I believe. Maybe she's bringing some people over.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you use your network. Let's move on real quick. We're going to hit the Marauders map. So where do we go? Where do we want this to take us? And we've talked about this a little bit, but let's each talk about a subplot, a specific subplot that we feel is important. And then we've got one more round after this of a character, so you can keep that in the back of your head, that we really want to maybe have a different shift. And we've glanced over these, but let's each identify maybe a plot line and a character.
Can I go first with I got a hot take, and that's that I really, because it's not in the books, but I think it'd be really cool if they could have some good, like, fleshed out scenes, like flashback scenes of the Marauders. And I know that's not until, book 3 or somewhere around there. But that is one of kind of like, I think one of my wish list items I've always had is if they're to do a series that's not part of, canon yet, if we could get some time with the Marauders, I think that would be really cool. So see them as, when they're in school and, as they learn to become animagus and everything like that, or animage, I guess, is that how you say it, plural?
I say animagus, or mages all.
But I think that would be really cool. But I just think the time we get to spend with like Lupin when he's in the third book, even if we don't get a lot of flashbacks, on that third series of a character I'd like to see fleshed out would be kind of Lupin and Sirius.
We think there's opportunities for it from 3 on, and like in the films they had in Order of the Phoenix, they have the big one when they're doing their OWLs and stuff. I'll also say when we talk about pronunciations and the way we refer to things, the audiobooks are really important. I don't think we emphasized that enough in the first episode. Yeah. I remember one time Steve and I were cleaning our room. We were in trouble, so we were cleaning our room late in the night, and then we were listening to Harry Potter while we did it. Eventually fell asleep, and I fell asleep to Harry Potter for about 20 years at least. And
Same.
It's thanks to my wife that it's ceased. But when it comes to pronunciations, we are Jim Dale first, then probably movies just because we hear them so much. And then I've listened to Stephen Fry ones quite a bit now as well. But when we keep calling them OWLs versus ALs, Accio versus Asio, maybe Jim Dale's the only one who says Asio, but I do. So anyway, Stephen, I agree. And the one that I'm going to pick is in a later-ish book as well. But I've always just said that the gambling subplot of Ludo Bagman is underrated. And just that dynamic that, like, the 4th book is so heavy on events and action. That's what, there was a discussion in the Reddit I want to give credit to. Someone who says, I hope this is more mystery and character-driven, whereas the other movies were more fantasy and action-driven. But it makes sense in a movie. To get the plot across, you have to have heavy exposition, and then you have to show the big battles, the big Quidditch matches, which they skip sometimes, which I think is a bold choice that they won't have to do. I hope they've come out with a more efficient way to film it now, but because there's going to be a good bit of Quidditch. Like, we need to have multiple Quidditch matches each season, even if we don't see a ton of action. But anyway, that subplot specifically, Bagman, and obviously like the house elf, like Dobby, kind of gets his role cut, and then he comes back and dies very emotionally in the movies. And so it's going to be for him and Winky to be around and like really fully flesh out those. I have a love-hate with the house elves. Like, they're not my favorite thing, but they're important, and I think it's actually, and SPW is a big subplot that was cut as well, and so we're gonna see, the elves and gambling. That's what I'm here for.
Well, with the elves too, it's like a complicated relationship, especially with Dobby. He's really annoying, and the movies really hit on that annoying part, but they don't quite get like the in between. So for me, I was gonna mention Dobby and Winky. I love Winky in the books, but. And then this is like a big one, but Voldemort, I would love the flashbacks from Voldemort to be in there more. I would love if the, 6th season on, even kind of 5th season on, it really becomes like showing more of Voldemort, like what's in the book, even if it's through the lens of Harry. And I know people don't love how that was translated in the 5th movie, but I kind of like the way they did that it became more of kind of a position thing because you have to like show it. But I am excited. I want the flashbacks of him and Dumbledore talking. I want his interviews. I just want to build him up more as the villain and his origin story so that the final battle and all that means so much more. And then this isn't really plot stuff, but I want to see magic. And I do think this was corrected in a good bit in the Fantastic Beasts films where you actually see like everyday kind of magic instead of like we see like Molly having one thing magically stirred. Like, I want to see more of the magic and the fun stuff throughout the series.
I think there's so many cool ways to show it too, though. I feel like there was a lot of like jabbing with wands, so that was a very like stage actor type of like obvious movement, and then you'd see something happen over there. You know, there wasn't always like, I don't know, the sparks that fly through the air, or, you know, like that kind of thing. I feel like there's a lot of like fantastical ways to kind of do that could be really visually interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think with Voldemort, I think there could be some really cool bottle episodes. Like I was just thinking, I've been rewatching Ted Lasso, and the episode about Beard, Coach Beard, when he like has a night out and like it's all focused on him. Like I could see some episodes like that where you're getting things from, you know, the anti-hero, the Voldemort perspective, and I think that would be a really cool way to kind of get what he's fighting for and why across.
Agree.
Let's take it to the last bit here. We're going to do is the golden snitch, the most important thing. It's hard to know what the most important thing is at this point. We've kind of discussed what is kind of critical to us about the changes. But I think my thought, and this is a storytelling thought, and so I think it's every fan is going to have a different way, but how do they make this really... I don't know, for us, we're going to be so anxious to see every bit of the story. But for a younger person or a person who's new, they know enough of the key events, or maybe they saw the movies, but they didn't read the books. How do they keep this really engaging week to week?
Yeah, are they going to do the cliffhanger on every episode? I don't know that I want that. But I feel like you're right that there has to be like a continuity there. I do think about my kids. So I have two kids who have, they're 10 and 8, and they've read through the series. And then as soon as they're done with the series, I wouldn't let them watch the movies until after they'd read that specific book. And so since then, though, they've gobbled up anything they can Harry Potter. So I kind of see it through their eyes and the things that they're going to want, what's going to keep them interested in it. And I mean, I think so. It's what I talked about before. It's some of it's that magic. It's, you know, how do you make it like really visually appealing and feel like you're part of this fantastical world? I think that's going to be the golden snitch, in my opinion, is to attract that new younger audience that they want so badly.
Well, and I think, you know, you think about the first 2 books especially, and I would say the 3rd book as well, they're really like kind of mystery kind of novels. Like you're trying to figure out what's happening and why this is happening. And I think that's immediately what pulled us all in as kids. And so it's going to be playing on that for the kids, but it is going to be hard because they're going to be playing to 2 audiences, obviously, like the new generation, really children of millennials, like our children. We know those are the parents that are going to be pushing this to their kids, and then us millennials. And so it's going to be a balance for us, like as adults, realizing, okay, like this is children's IP at the beginning, especially. Let's let them enjoy it. But like also you want to keep us as an audience around because we're the people with money, and like we're the people that are going to keep pushing it and allowing it in our home and paying for the HBO subscription, all that kind of stuff. So it is gonna be definitely a balance of like satisfying both audiences, but I do think in those first films is playing up the mystery, and like even if they end on cliffhangers, like we're all gonna know what's gonna happen. So it's gonna be, you know, also playing off of that. Like Game of Thrones, a lot of people knew what was coming, but I think, I mean, I had friends who had read the books. They were so excited to hear what I thought of like the end of season 1. They're like, oh my gosh, what'd you think, when they knew it was coming all along. So there's going to be that element too. Like we're excited for like the new generation people to be seeing it.
Sounds like there's going to be skipping Gen Z altogether. But really, I work with people who are, you know, 10 years younger than me, and some it does, some it skipped over. Also in the UK, because it's so UK centric, you do get some people who are like, they kind of roll their eyes at it, and then other people like it is important part, or they're really knowledgeable about it. I think when there is something, if they market it right, it should give us a chance at something where a lot of people are watching and caring, and then it just has to be good, no big deal. It's funny, they're releasing it as an HBO title instead of a Max title, because it's, you know, hopefully that means higher budget, more quality, but I'm going to be watching it on Max. I should say I'm watching it on Sky, because that's legally where it will air here. But, you know, none of us actually subscribe to HBO anymore. We're out of the cable bundle, so we're not too old. But that's the impossible thing. I keep thinking, I'm like, oh, we need to talk about this plot, this character, what they're going to do with this, and we just really want it to be cohesive, and they're going to try some things we don't like, and I think that's okay. I want them to take some swings and misses, but there has to be the crux of enjoying being with the trio and seeing them go through their journey. So I think that's going to wrap us here. I'll let you guys have any moments for a last word. I just want everyone to know what to expect in the next episode. We're going to talk more about our personal journeys with Harry Potter. We'll go through kind of that, what it was like going through the time of the book release and then everything that's happened since then. So the other subject we'll cover is the expanded Harry Potter universe, anything outside of the 7 books and movies, 8 movies. So we can go through Fantastic Beasts, what we liked and didn't like, Cursed Child, theme parks. We're probably going to get a Universal theme park here in the UK. And I really wonder, are they going to try and build Hogwarts as the production design for the new film? Because I think it should be a hotel and it should be incredible. So we will talk about, we can do a whole thing on theme parks, but maybe I'll do that with someone theme park nerdy. And yeah, we'll maybe bring on people who aren't as into it as us and give us a different perspective, and we're going to have fun with it. But next time, definitely will be about our journey with Harry Potter and then the expanded Harry Potter universe. What has come out since the books, and it's been pretty hit or miss. And we can definitely link all of that into the new TV show. Like the dregs of the teacups, do you guys have any last bits that are going to help us tell the future of this television program?
It's just going to be interesting to see, and I'm excited to see as like artwork comes out, and hopefully we'll get some snippets of like what things are looking like, and really how there's, to me, the most interesting is how they're going to build on this current IP. There's millions and millions of dollars thrown into the theme parks that have a certain look. We all identify with something, with how the films look and all that now. So the music, all of that. So like what they're going to use, how much they're going to try to change things and how much they aren't. And I don't know. I'm just excited to see.
How do you keep that magic that the books invented, but we've all felt throughout different iterations? Because I will say there's still something quite magical about Cursed Child, even though I hate the plot. And they did it with a very different music. But yeah, like Hedwig's theme is so linked. It's like how every Star Wars movie has had a twinkle of either the Death March or the main title sequence. It's like, how do you lightly touch on it and pay homage? Like I said, we could get casting. Like someone said today, maybe that Dudley guy who was in Queen's Gambit, the actor who played him, should play Snape. And I was like, you know what? That'd probably work. But it's a balance. I don't know. Steve, did you have any last thoughts?
I'm just excited to be, hopefully pleasantly surprised, like you said, right? Hopefully there are things that are completely off the wall that I never would have thought of that just work, blows my mind. That's kind of the thing that I'm hoping for. And I'm sure there are some things that will go the other direction. But I think it's we've talked about this a little bit, but it's a very hard line to walk, right? Not only do you have like a very dedicated fan base, but every single person who read those books, right, has their own vision of what it can be, what the movie should have done differently. And so to kind of try and please all of them it's impossible. We've seen that with Star Wars where it's gone sideways. And so my hope is that they can do a solid enough job where we can get a couple of seasons in. If the first season's a disaster, it's not going anywhere, right? So I think that's just, we gotta find that balance of, how can we do something that's great without being too extreme, and then we can, as we learn what our audience loves, we can grow with that. But yeah, it's gonna be really interesting. And
Can you imagine if there was just 2 seasons of Harry Potter floating in the ether and they don't? It's a hard thing about redoing this instead of. But they needed to re-spark the franchise before they try to spin off. We talk about Marauders. If they wanted to do a spin off that, this has to work. Everything hinges on this, which is scary. More can go wrong than right. But I think it's a good sign that we're excited about it. So,
well, and also like that, unlike Game of Thrones, they are starting with a complete series. And so they'll know where they're going by the end. So that gives me hope as well. But I will be very sad if we have like 1 season of a TV show that never moves on.
I still believe in George finishing wins, okay? Not spring, but wins, and I won't let it go. But yeah, if you
die any minute. I'm just waiting for the news.
If you want to interact with us in any way, you can email us at hptvpodcast@gmail.com, and we are on Instagram at HPTVPod. If TikTok survives, we'll start a TikTok. Otherwise, we're also, if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple or Google or Pocket Cast, whatever you use, we are also on YouTube. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can also listen to us from your pocket. So please join us, send us stuff. If we get any interaction, 100%, we'll want to interact with everyone. So we're going to keep making cool stuff and keep being awesome podcasting muggles.
Please subscribe. Thank you.
Rate, review, and subscribe. Is that what they say?
The real like magic.
You can tell we love Harry Potter. This is us coming to this for Harry Potter.